Hi everyone, this is Legacy School Year 7 History, Lesson 17. This is a lesson for those who study online or those who were absent from school on the second week, so between the 7th and 11th of February. We were talking mainly about two important kings, John I and Edward I. We also talked about a document called Magna Carta. So our objectives today is to learn about, what happened after Henry II, why John I had a bad reputation and if he deserved this bad reputation. We will be talking about the Magna Carta, what it is and why it was significant at that time, what happened after John died, and we will be talking about Edward I. So after Henry II, we have understood during the previous lessons that Henry II was married to Eleanor of Aquitaine, and when Eleanor of Aquitaine and their children, as we know, they had 8 children together who were rather unhappy that their father did not want to share the ruling of this huge Angevin empire that he created. They rebelled against their father. Henry II got obviously quite upset, captured his own wife and put her to prison for 16 years. Now, after Henry II died, as they say, died of sadness and loneliness, his son Richard I, or Richard Lionheart, became the King of England. He was the oldest surviving son of Henry II and Eleanor of Aquitaine. Only 2 children survived Henry. So Richard I becomes the King of England, and his nickname was Lionheart because he was very brave and in battle. As soon as he became a king, he went on the Crusades to fight back Jerusalem and the Holy Land. We will be talking about this later. He was king for approximately 10 years, and most of this time he spent outside fighting in the Crusades, and practically his mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine, was the one that ruled the country. At the same time, John, his younger brother, wanted to take the throne, and at one point when Richard Lionheart was kidnapped somewhere in Austria, somewhere in Europe, John back home claimed that his brother died, so he wanted to become the king. When Richard Lionheart all of a sudden returned back, he forgave his brother, but 5 years after that he died, and John became the king anyways. So John became John I, King John of England, and he is also known as John Lackland. He doesn't have a very kind nickname, not unlike his brother. He was called John Lackland and John Soft Sword as well. So let's take a look at why he had such bad reputation. He was famous for not being very friendly with the Catholic Church, first of all, and the bad relationship between them got to the point where the Roman Catholic Church closed down the churches in England. So there was no baptism, there were no funerals, and the people actually thought that they would go to hell without these ceremonies, without the ceremony of baptism, when a Christian child gets accepted basically into the Christian church. These ceremonies ceased to be performed by the Christian monks and Christian priests. The people for a couple of years lived in fear that if they died, they would go to hell as they were not baptized, so they were not officially Christians. So this was one of the main reasons that John had a very bad reputation. He also lost quite a lot of his land, his father's land. That was the so-called Angevin Empire. And because he was not very good in battle, people started calling him John Soft Sword. And as a weak king, his huge empire disintegrated. He lost his land. His other nickname was John Lackland. Another thing that contributed to his very bad reputation is that he was quite ruthless. He got rid of, they say, he got rid of his nephew as well, and whoever did not agree with him would disappear or would be murdered. He ruthlessly starved his enemies to death. He even starved to death the wife and child of his one of his best friends, used to be one of his best friends, but when he turned against him, John ruthlessly starved his wife and child to death. So all these created quite a bad reputation about John. Another thing that he did and was very unpopular with the barons of his country is that he gave a lot of important positions to foreigners. As we already mentioned, he was a very weak king. He lost a lot of territories. So he tried to get these territories back by taxing his barons so he could lead military campaigns in France or the French territories. Of course, nobles did not want to be taxed so much, so they revolted against him. Eventually, they forced him to sign a document which was called Magna Carta. It means Great Charter, and it's a great charter of rights or clauses, which is unique of its kind at that time. We will be talking about it just shortly. And now when he died, one of the monks of that time said, hell is too good for a horrible person like that. So you could see that his reputation was quite bad. No matter how much he tried to visit widows and orphans in the country and try to reach out for the poor people, because he was at odds with the church, most of the people did not like him, as they thought that their daily misery is indirectly caused by John I. So let's take a look at the Magna Carta, which was signed in 1215. This is the most famous charter of rights in English history. And the barons forced John to agree to it in 1215. And it set out the rights of freemen in the country. Freemen were those people who did not belong to a lord. So basically the people who lived in towns and cities. Okay, we know that 90% of the people in the Middle Ages lived in the countryside, and they were peasants, they were farmers, and they belonged to a lord. Right? 10% were approximately freemen who lived in towns, and they did not belong to a lord. So it set out the rights of freemen in the country, and it protected the rights of nobles and not the poor, of course. It was the first time when nobles forced the English king to accept their terms, so it was very unique in a way. This was the first time the king had to sign that he is going to, in the future, he's going to abide by the laws that were created by people under him. So some of the clauses, you can see a picture of the Magna Carta, the original document in this picture. Some of the clauses, there are of course dozens of clauses inside this document. Just some of the clauses would say that the king cannot tax the nobles without asking them. Every man has the right to a trial by jury, so not just a person or a lord, just because he is rich, will say that another person needs to be punished for a crime. So because of the Magna Carta, every man started to have the right to a trial by a jury and a trial without delay. So it could not happen that somebody was kept in prison for months or years. His trial had to start as soon as possible. And the king should not interfere with the church. We can see that the nobles did not like the church's authority to be questioned. The church was still the most powerful authority in the country. And usually the people did not want the king to be above the church. They wanted the church to be above the king. So eventually John signed the Magna Carta, but soon afterwards he cancelled it. And of course that created a war between the nobles and John. And this argument started for a couple of years until John died. Now after John, his son called Henry III ruled for more than 50 years. And he was also in constant conflict with his barons, just like his father. Like his son, Edward I, literally grew up on the battlefield, fighting for his father first, and then fighting for himself when he became a king. Now, he was an excellent soldier. As you can see on this picture, he's holding a sword, so it will be very easy for you to remember that he was a very, very excellent soldier, a very good military leader. Okay, he was called Edward Longshanks because apparently he was a very tall person. He had very long legs. Okay? So he was very famous, and he inherited his grandfather's cruelty. And he was very famous, unfortunately, or we should say infamous, for torturing and killing anybody who defied him. He earned a especially bad reputation amongst the Welsh and the Scottish people. He tried to invade Scotland as well. Now, gradually, he returned all the territories that were previously lost with the barons and with all kinds of fighting and chaos in the country. He gained these territories back. He created the hereditary title of the Prince of Wales, which continues until now. So you can see that this title has a history of basically 1,000 years, almost 1,000 years. Right? 800 to be more precise. Now, he tried to occupy Scotland, but he did not succeed because he met William Wallace, who was a Scottish knight, a military leader of the First War of Scottish Independence. Edward Longshanks, of course, had an eye for Scotland and wanted to occupy it. But it's a very difficult place to occupy, obviously. Scotland is not an easy territory for the English army to invade. Not to mention that the Scottish have always been known as very fierce fighters. So William Wallace defeated the English army in several skirmishes and battles. One of them was the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297. He was appointed the Guardian of Scotland, and he served until a defeat, a rather big defeat in the Battle of Falkirk. That was later on. William Wallace was captured in 1305, and he was handed over to King Edward, who, of course, tortured him. He had him hanged, drawn, and quartered. This was a very gruesome way of killing a person. He was hanged to a pole, drawn by a horse to his place of execution, and eventually chopped into 4 pieces for high treason. For doing some sort of massive crime against the king. That would be high treason. And his body parts were sent all around England to deter other rebels. Now, William Wallace's fight continued by with the help of Robert the Bruce, who became the King of Scots. He was a famous warrior during the First War of Scottish Independence, and he's a big Scottish national hero. He was also the guardian of Scotland between 1298 and 1300. Now, in many battles between 1310 and 1314, he won control of much of Scotland. So this is why it's called the First War of Scottish Independence. And they gained their independence in the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314, when he defeated Edward II, and Scotland remained independent for 400 more years. And you can see his statue close to the site where this famous battle took place, the field of Bannockburn. Right, so I would like to ask you to do this homework. Please read about John I and the Magna Carta. Read about Edward Longshanks. These are on pages 44 to 47, and answer the questions. These are 2 double pages, so on page 45 and 47 you will have 5 questions. Please answer those. Thank you very much.